Hey guys, good morning. So it's Super Bowl Sunday, February 3rd, and I hadn't left you a voicemail, or not voicemail, or a video in a couple of days, and for that I apologize. There are two, maybe a third thing I want to talk about today. It's about 7 o'clock here. Actually, it's a little bit later than that, and the house is quiet except for the dogs. My little ones are still sleeping, unlike Landon for sure. And the big one over there is still sleeping, but I got up around 3 this morning and did about an hour of work, and I've been writing um, ever since. And again, it's just been remarkable. Um, t- Today, I've been catching up on what's going to lead into one of my uh, I don't maybe I shouldn't say one of my worst days on the journey, but it was could have turned really bad. It was one of my more scared days, but a lot of events. So I'm talking about Max in Bucyrus, Ohio. His dad Gary, his mom Lisa, wonderful family, and really great time. On my trip up to Upper Sandusky, I've been writing about that. Like I said, a lot of content. When you meet people, there's a lot to say about them when they're, you know, really good people. So much love to them and to all of you for following. But a couple things I wanted to talk about today. One may go on a religious kind of thought. Um, Most of you know this journey was sort of, not sort of, it brought about me questioning spirituality and things I hadn't done before. And then there's another one. I like to share things with you I think are worth the time. Life's too short. I'd rather have you guys watch and learn something from, as I did yesterday, I think, and maybe not even, just share it with you. So let me talk about, what do you think, religious and non-religious first? Um, you know what, let's just go religious. Hang in with me to the second part. But one of the things that the other day I posted something about my trip to church last Sunday, and I posted a particular song that was being sung, and questioned how the last line could be taken. And I was really, I liked it because it got some feedback and a conversation going on my website, and some of it was from people that kind of, you know, think that religion is hokey, and others obviously saying, hey, what do you believe in then if you don't believe in this? But credit to those folks, because it wasn't any kind of, you know, vitriol or finger pointing or anything negative. It was a conversation. But I try to see both sides of things. And 2 nights ago, uh, I'm lying in bed, and I don't know if you guys have anybody in your life like this, but I have somebody in mind. I won't say her name. It rhymes with Ramey, but for whatever reason, she insists on putting on the damn television and then all over going to sleep, which just drives me out of my mind. Um, the other thing is, we watch like 4 channels in this house, and she watches like 2, one of which is that ID channel, which is always talking about murder. Now, one of the things I've seen, I even talked about it on my journey one day, but one of the things is about 1:30 in the morning. This is kind of how weird my mind works. So I wake up, and of course the TV's on, and it's on the ID channel, and it was about a case where the person was not uh, guilty of it, but was convicted of it. And I know somebody I met in my life that spent 18 years in prison for a murder they didn't commit. And now you wonder about that for a minute. And there's a second part to tie in this, and it's how people react to certain things. So I'm watching this ID channel about a murderer or a convicted murderer who didn't commit the murder. And as I'm laying there thinking about how does this happen? I mean, if I was ever convicted of something I know I didn't do, I think for the most part I'd keep my composure, because I'd say, the truth would come out. The truth will come out and exonerate me. But time after time, even in these shows, you see people focus in on one person, the husband, the wife. It's got to be, this person. And they miss looking for others. And then when this person didn't do it, in this case, it was a husband or an estranged husband that was convicted of the murder, and he's still vilified around town. But anyway, how this ties into religion is this, right? And I think this is one of the points that the anti-believer was saying last week. When I ask people about that, I look at myself and say, how does God allow people to be unjustly convicted, right? Now, maybe, I don't know what the answers I would get from believers. Would it be that that's a small thing and he's working on grander scale? I guess that could be an option. The one I hear a lot, hey Champ, how you doing, buddy? The one I hear a lot, which just kind of bothers me a little bit, is this. Well, that's just his plan. I mean, based on that theory, you can sweep anything under the rug by saying, well, that's just his plan, and he knows and I don't, right? So that's got me thinking and wrestling. So I already don't sleep a whole lot, but here I am wrestling at 1:30 in the morning with this whole, but shh, baby boy. So, is there a God, and if so, how does he let that happen? How can I explain that? And then to give me a really good answer, I don't know that there is one. To just sweep under the rug and say, well, that's just his plan. He has a plan. It's just too convenient, On that note, one of the things I see on the ID channel, which I'll tie into this second part as well, is people react to death and things differently. And I myself have experienced a lot of death at a young age, and I'm really pretty numb to it. I've shared it on my journey talks before. I'm kind of wired. When I wake up each day, I expect bad news. I expect the terrible news of something, and I'm kind of just deal with things as they go. When I found out my dad was murdered, I was sitting on my mom's lap. I was 11 or 12 years old, 12. I just looked numb, and I guess she wanted a reaction, was surprised, and don't you want to cry? And I mean, you gave me news, now I have to deal with it. That's kind of how I deal with life. So one of the things I see on these ID channels all the time is whenever they call somebody for a question is the way the person reacted on the 911 call or on this or on that. I'm sure they're telltale signs. No, but I could absolutely assure you, if anybody ever accused me of something, I would be number one suspect just the way I react, because they would think I'm uncold or unfeeling or whatever, I guess. Now, luckily I've never been in that circumstance. I certainly haven't lost anything like a child. I certainly don't think I'd be composed then. But anyway, that ties into this next thing. So, before I get to the next thing, I'll go back to religion for a minute. One of the things I've enjoyed is reading the Bible. I'll be heading to church here in a few hours, and I've been reading Genesis to my children. But I try to be, again, my level of attention and ability to comprehend lasts about 3 or 4 pages. I got to do it in short spurts. So here I got past, how Noah created the ark and why, and how the world was kind of repopulated through his sons and their wives. And then I get to this section of Genesis where, my Lord, all it does is tell me, whose kids or whose grandkids or whose great-grandkids, and this king of this town I can't pronounce, and this king of this town. I've been reading it to my children as I go, but I'm almost embarrassed to read it to my kids. One, because if someone read that to me, I would be zoned out in a heartbeat. Two is I don't even know how to pronounce the names. I'm pretty good with that, and I take pride in that. So if I don't know how, I'm embarrassed to pronounce something wrong. Maybe they follow through. So just in my little sharing with you of my Bible experience so far, that's what I've gotten about 8 pages into Genesis, and dealing with that. So now the second thing I want to share with you guys. As I mentioned on the journey, one of the things I got into on the road through Netflix was documentaries. And yesterday afternoon, after work, yesterday evening, at the fireplace on, I put on Netflix, and it's a documentary called Blackfish. And it was really, so Blackfish is a story about SeaWorld and, the debate between capturing wild orcas and bringing them into captivity, the safety involved, and so forth. Now, I can honestly tell you, I love nature. I love animals. One of my biggest bucket list things as a young person was to get to SeaWorld. One of my biggest bucket list things to do with my children was to get to SeaWorld. Those animals are majestic, beautiful, amazing what they do. The show that I saw when I was about 28 years old in San Diego was breathtaking. These trainers go on the nose of an orchid jumping up into the floor. Unbelievable. And again, you only hear what you are told. So I knew there were a couple of circumstances as a young person, but there's unfortunate incidents with, firemen and women and policemen and women and astronauts and a lot of people that know the risk when they go into doing something they love. And I don't know anybody that was forced to go be a trainer at SeaWorld. So the movie starts talking about, this topic. And in the first 10 minutes, I guess I'm sitting there thinking, kind of getting like, this is, ignorant. If you ask any of those trainers right now if they would go do it again, I'm sure most of them would. They did it out of love. What an experience. And I sat there as a person watching this. 5, 6 years ago, I took my kids, and the show was different. They weren't in the water. I didn't understand why. And they didn't have the great show that I saw. Still amazing. But then minute 11 or 12 goes into this documentary, and it changes. It's not about, these trainers being at risk. It turns into the animals. And there were a few things that stuck out at me. There were 3 things that stuck out at me. First of all, when they captured the original animals back in 1970, I think in Puget Sound, they went for the young ones, and they herded them up, and they captured 3 of these smaller whales. And their goal, they had about 30 whales inside this giant net. They cut the net, thinking that, like most animals, it would be, flee and protect safety. Not one of these whales fled. They sat around there lined up 25 deep, screaming at the top of their lungs for these little ones. I mean, it was to see families, human families should be like that, and some are, but a lot aren't. It was breathtaking, and to see the pain on these whales, or hear the pain in their screams, was kind of crazy. And what some of the gentlemen said that were involved really shake you up a little bit. So that's one part. And the second part, which goes back to that ID channel, my daughter, showed it to her. They talked to these 2 women who were eyewitnesses at not a SeaWorld, but a marine park up in Canada, that witnessed the death of somebody being pulled in by an orca, by Tillicum, who seems to be the guy that does most of these things. But as they're talking to them, there are 2 women sitting on the couch, or the chairs, and one can tell is somber and very distraught. And this other woman is smiling as if she was laughing. Now, I understand that I had to try to explain this to my daughter, that she's not laughing, that it's a defense mechanism for some people. In fact, as she was saying, my condolences to the family, she was smiling almost ear to ear while she was doing it, and it was so bizarre. But again, this is how people, we all react differently. So what if this woman, going back to the ID channel situation, somebody said, hey, did you do this? And that's how she reacted. Right away, number 1 suspect, just because of that. But anyway, back to Blackfish. So it continued with that. That was a very bizarre moment when I watched this woman smile, talking about witnessing a woman, being killed in front of her eyes. Then you took on, the last of it was the severity and the frequency of these attacks and these claims. And the one that really bothered me, by this time I'm already feeling guilty that I supported so vehemently SeaWorld and its beauty. I haven't seen what I saw, because I almost feel like I contributed to, I want to use an analogy, but I don't have one to come off hand. But it's almost like going to a bullfight. Someone's going to end up dying. You're paying money to see this bull get put to death. I would never do that myself. And in a sense, that's kind of what this was here. These animals that I walked into and watched, how they got there, I never entertained. They were there for my selfish amusement. But through these deaths, the spin that the billion-dollar corporation would put on the deaths, essentially blaming the trainers, was so staggeringly offensive. There was one video clip where one of the first trainers, this woman, Beth, I think her name was, had a ponytail. The orca, she was swimming with the orca in the show, and it grabbed her by the foot and killed her. And the press release was that it grabbed her by her ponytail, and she would tell you if she was sitting right here that she knows that's a mistake. And of course, the people lying and covering up that are forced to, because their job depends on it, to say, hey. But then, no, I don't know if it wasn't the CEO, but a high executive for SeaWorld got on and literally blamed her and trainer error on her death, when it was so far from the truth, and they had video to prove it. How do people just blatantly lie like that for the greed? So it totally changed me. So I encourage you guys to watch the video Blackfish and develop your own thoughts. I gotta run. Guys, I'm on a low battery. Have yourselves a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.